What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so I learned a gaming term. Apparently it's called like being tilted, which basically means like you're mad because you're losing. If that's the case, I used to make people tilt in Call of Duty all the time back in the day. I was like, man, don't be mad at me for wrecking you. Be mad at yourself for being so bad. But anyway, so we are continuing on with our story on Earth X. Yes, I love Earth X. It's one of my favorite stories. I love this story. Again, this is like a dystopian future. So it's just like, man, like things are really popping off. Now, so far, what we've basically had is the idea that like everybody on Earth has powers. I mean, we didn't know exactly how it was they all got powers, but like everybody on Earth has powers. The result is that there really is no more need for superheroes, but things turn out exactly like we would expect. The world's completely gone to pot. Not only that, in Los Angeles, California, you had the Skull, which is basically just a kid that had the ability to like dominate the minds of others. But the result is that because the Skull's army is basically growing in number to the tens of thousands, and he's making his way across the country, basically looking to completely and totally take over the United States and then the world, Captain America has basically been traveling around trying to rally as many people to his side as he can. Now, of course, from here, we pick up in England with Captain Britain. Now, this is kind of cool because Captain Britain, as he's shown here, is basically just the guy who's running Britain at this point in time. He's just the guy who's basically running the show. We're not really told exactly how this happened, but like we can surmise, we can kind of take a guess. And most likely what happened was that, like America, in England, when all these different people across the country gained their powers, the government basically just fell to pieces and Captain Britain rose up. Now, the funny thing about this is that when it comes to Brian Braddock, he's one of those characters that people just sort of make fun of, right? Like, oh man, Captain Britain, he's gonna save the day. Not. That's kind of how people, you know, talk about Captain Britain. He's kind of a jokeable, laughable character that no one really pays much attention to. But if you go back and read his stories, while he is kind of a joke of a character, the way he's written sometimes, he's got it where it counts. But the whole idea is that with Captain America showing up here and saying, look, like we need you to our side, what we find out is that what basically passes for Excalibur in Earth X, that they're all basically gone. Like they're basically out of this. Now, what ended up taking place here is the group went against a guy named Grey Gargoyle, who I want to say is Paul Duvall. I think that's his name. I want to say with his powers, he can touch things and turn them to stone. I can't remember. Honestly, he's so obscure of a character and I'm too lazy to look him up. But regardless, all the members of Excalibur are stuck in stone. But basically that's why Captain Britain's like the only person here. Captain Britain says, no, I'm not going to join your ranks. Like go do your own thing, but my loyalty is to Britain. My loyalty is not to the United States. I will do whatever I need to do in order to keep this place protected. And so from here, we pick up with the Skull in New York in the home of Norman Osborn. Now, the funny thing about this is that this throws into sharp relief the nature of the president of the United States, right? Like take away the armies, take away the Secret Service. What's the president of the United States? Just a guy in an office, and that's it. Like the president exists and functions because people are willing to do what he asks them to do, but that's it. I mean, Norman Osborn is just like a guy who's here, but like when there's no one there to protect him, well then suddenly the president becomes awfully vulnerable. And that's what goes on here. Like the Skull walks in and it's just like, you're just a guy in an office, man. Like you have no power. Like you are just a person who's here. And like all the people who could help you, I've taken control of, and like they all belong to me. So like you're gonna die now. Like we're gonna kill you. And that's what happens here. Like he essentially turns the mind of Norman Osborn inside out and forces Norman Osborn to like confront Gwen Stacy. Now again, this ties into the whole history of Spider-Man and the fact that the main Marvel Universe continuity of Spider-Man is still a part of Earth X, in the sense that Peter Parker was in a relationship with Gwen Stacy. She died at the hands of Norman Osborn, and he's just kind of forced to face this illusion of her being there. But of course, the mask is basically ripped off. But of course, again, in this scenario, it's actually Skull himself who looks like Gwen Stacy. But the mask of Norman Osborn is torn off, and that's when we find out it's been Green Goblin the entire time. So again, it's kind of what we expected for the most part. I mean, Norman Osborn and Green Goblin go hand in hand, and there's rarely ever been a circumstance where Marvel has given us Norman Osborn and then not brought in Green Goblin somewhere along the line. But at this point, we pick up with really with Machine Man meeting with Reed Richards. Now again, in the last video, we talked about how Machine Man was created for the purpose of being a super soldier more or less, but he had essentially developed human attributes, and the result was that somewhere along the line, the Watcher had basically snatched him off of Earth and brought him to the moon. Now the idea was that the Watcher is blinded. We don't know who blinded the Watcher, we just know the Watcher's blind. And the result is that Machine Man started, spilling, or at least starts spilling all this information to Reed Richards, all the things that he's learned. And one of the things that he's learned here is that when it comes to like all these beings on Earth who have superpowers, that we're basically anti antibodies, or at least these superheroes and all these people with powers are essentially antibodies for the Earth. They're designed to fight off quote unquote infection. That infection basically being whatever space invading organism or race or Thanos or what have you comes to Earth and tries to destroy it. They're basically designed to be a safeguard, but we don't know why. All we know is like that's the case. The implication is that it's because the Celestials wanted it to be that way, but again, we don't know if everybody having powers was part of the plan or if everybody having powers was the plan gone awry. So again, it is kind of intriguing, but it's designed to kind of build up this whole idea of like the greater role that Earth X plays with regards to this story. But at this point, we pick back up with the Inhumans. And again, the Inhumans are not really our guides on this. Really, our guide is more of Machine Man. But the Inhumans are here to provide us with a kind of objective perspective, which is to say, they've basically shown up, they've come back to Earth after everybody has powers. And they're basically figuring things out as we figure things out as the reader, which is one of the reasons why I like the Inhumans as they exist in this story. The issue with this is that Karnak, who doesn't really have any powers per se, specializes in like figuring out how things work. Basically, it's kind of a caveat that Marvel uses to give him powers, even though he doesn't really have powers. It's just the thing that he can do. But Karnak's been trying to figure out what's been going on here in terms of why everybody has powers. The initial indication was that everybody getting powers, everybody being an Inhuman, was the result of the actions of Maximus the Mad, the brother of Black Bolt, who had somehow detonated this Terrigen bomb and gave everybody Inhuman powers on Earth. The indication was that it wasn't actually Maximus who did it, because Maximus was defeated by Black Bolt before it could be done. So the question was asked, like, who set this whole Terrigenesis thing in motion? And so where Karnak starts to sort of question Medusa to a degree and basically say, hey, look, maybe it wasn't really Maximus the Mad, maybe it was, you know, somebody, that guy over there who doesn't talk, maybe it was him, you know, where he kind of hints at that idea. Medusa dismisses it. Now remember, Medusa as the wife of Black Bolt is loyal to her husband and loyal to the king. Medusa will kill every Inhuman that exists out there before she will betray her husband willingly. And that leads us into the revelation of who detonated the Terrigen bomb. And we end up finding out it was actually Black Bolt himself, that Black Bolt had detonated this Terrigen bomb and gave everybody on Earth Inhuman powers. And the reason for this is because of the fact, in the mind of Black Bolt, that there were some Inhumans who had left the royal family, and there were some Inhumans who, by whatever manner and whatever means, had developed their powers. And the result was that Black Bolt saw how they were treated. In a lot of ways, people believed they were mutants because no one knew about the Inhumans. And so when Black Bolt looked and realized that some of them are actually Inhumans and that normal human beings are treating them terribly because they have fantastic powers, Black Bolt's idea was that if the Inhumans are going to leave Earth, he's going to provide, quote unquote, one last gift. He's going to detonate this Terrigen bomb, and all the Inhumans that exist on Earth are going to gain powers. And that's exactly what happened. Everybody basically started gaining powers. And that's what ends up happening with regards to Machine Man explaining all these things to Reed Richards when we jump back. Machine Man basically says, like, this was part of the plan. When the Celestials modified the genes of early man and they created the Deviants and the Eternals, and the baseline humans would eventually go on to develop mutant powers or what have you, and when the Inhumans arrived on Earth and so on and so forth, all that was part of the role of these Celestials. That this is what the Celestials do. The Celestials travel from one world to the next, and they plant their offspring, their seed, so to speak, inside of a planet. And then they charge the denizens of that planet to keep it safe, not really telling them what it is. Instead, they just modify their genes so that there are various superheroes that exist. They'll fight amongst one another, but they will be protective of their home. And so following the desire for survival, if an alien race shows up, like Thanos invades or something like that, they'll fight off Thanos because he's a villain, he wants to destroy the Earth, they want to keep the Earth safe, all the while not realizing what they're actually doing is protecting the celestial seed inside of the Earth. And that's what's happening right now. At this point, what seems to be going on is the Celestials are making their return because the seed has germinated, and now it's just a matter of the Celestial inside the Earth being born. And when it does, when that happens, the entirety of the Earth will be destroyed. And so at this point, we jump directly to the Battle of New York, basically, with the Skull's army facing off against Captain America's forces. And this is interesting. This is one of the reasons why the Skull is such an intriguing character, because this guy is basically just a kid, and he views the world as a kid. Well, I want respect. Treat me with respect. If you don't treat me with respect, then I'm just going to be angry at you. Like he's very much childlike in terms of how he views the world. And the result is that where one of his members basically insults him, then he simply says, "You guys do what I tell you to. You guys don't have freedom here. You guys do whatever it is that I tell you to do. You guys live and breathe because I allow you to." And he illustrates this point by taking away everybody's ability to move. And so you have Captain America's forces running through, just killing every single person that they come across, destroying all these different forces of the Skull, and then ultimately going for the Skull himself. Now, ultimately, we end up finding out that like the forces of Captain Britain ended up joining the forces of Captain America, and they're literally just going through and wrecking as many people as they can. Now, ultimately, the Skull simply says, "Okay, fine, everybody get back to it." Because honestly, what kingdom am I going to have if I can't dominate this place? At the same time, what you also have is the Incredible Hulk in this situation. Now remember, this fight, being as cool as it is, brings in some pretty unique things. The Incredible Hulk is an extension of Bruce Banner. Now, very much in a literal sense. Bruce Banner is basically the soul of the Incredible Hulk. And so in this instance, the Skull can't really dominate the Incredible Hulk's mind because there's not really a mind there to dominate. The Hulk does what Bruce Banner wants it to because it's like Bruce Banner tearing off an arm and the arm doing whatever it is that Bruce Banner wants it to do. That's how this works. And so because of this, where the Skull tries to dominate the Hulk right off the bat, it ultimately doesn't work. But what ends up happening is the forces of the Skull manage to get a hold of Bruce Banner. And when they do, they basically control the Incredible Hulk. As long as he dominates Banner, he dominates the Hulk. And so what's basically happening is really the Skull himself is just slowly and steadily taking over all the forces of Captain America. The Skull continues to sort of torment Captain America. Again, like making him see all these things, making him do all these things, the things that he doesn't want to do, ending the war, so on and so forth. It is kind of intriguing. And so that's when we find out that, again, because of the fact that Black Bolt had detonated the Terrigen bomb, what he had also done is he wanted to cover his tracks, leaving Earth and basically saying, like, we've detonated this bomb. No one can know what we've done. We've timed the detonation of this bomb so that when Reed Richards activates his device, that he will believe that he basically set all this in motion, that somehow energy from vibranium, in order to give the world, infinite energy, that somehow it gave everybody powers. We can just kind of walk away and let them believe that. The Watcher would have seen everything that had happened, and the Watcher would have known everything that had happened, and the Watcher would have told Reed Richards. He would have told the Earth superheroes. And so the result was that Black Bolt had taken the eyes of the Watcher. He basically blinded him. So again, if you guys look at this story for what it is, for these little moments here and there are a lot of stories that spun out of Marvel Comics that we learned about this whole thing. For example, the idea of a Terrigen bomb being detonated and everybody getting powers from Terrigenesis on Earth, that was used in the events of the aftermath of Infinity, and the whole idea of Inhuman. The Watcher being blinded, that's Original Sin. All these stories that Marvel has recently launched have all been predicated on this. There are a lot of cool things that go on here, but what we end up finding out is that the idea of Black Bolt is to try to destroy the Celestials. Now, the voice he has is capable of doing that. The voice can like shatter a god. This is one of those things where Marvel kind of beefs up the power of Black Bolt for the purpose of this story. In the main Marvel universe, Black Bolt's nowhere near this powerful. But if you read House of M, it's definitely powerful enough. He whispers and wipes out what amounts to like 2 or 3 football fields worth of land. I mean, it's a crazy set of events. Black Bolt flies out to meet the Celestials on the blue area of the moon in an effort to try to destroy them and hopefully find some way to be able to save the Earth. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.